I never thought I'd be fighting for my nurse's right to enter my own home while battling stage 3 lymphoma, but here we are. The day started like any other post-chemo morning. Me feeling weak, waiting for Sarah, my home care nurse, to arrive for my medication and wound care. That's when I heard the commotion outside my front gate. From my living room window, I watched in utter disbelief as a middle-aged woman with a classic, "Can I speak to your manager?" haircut physically blocked Sarah from entering. "Excuse me. Medical visitors aren't allowed in Sycamore Heights. This is private property," the woman shouted, her face turning an alarming shade of red. I recognized her immediately. Barbara Winters, our HOA president, though everyone in the neighborhood just called her Karen behind her back. Sarah, always professional, tried explaining. "Sir, I'm his registered nurse. I come here every day to—" "I don't care if you're Florence Nightingale herself," Karen interrupted, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling security right now, and if you don't leave, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." My blood boiled as I watched Sarah stand there, clutching my medication bag, completely bewildered. I forced myself to the door, despite the pain shooting through my body. Living in Sycamore Heights had always come with its challenges. The Homeowners Association rules were strict, but generally reasonable, until Barbara took over as president 6 months ago. Since then, she'd been on a power trip, creating new emergency bylaws, seemingly on a whim and enforcing them with religious zeal. But this was crossing a line I didn't even know could be crossed. I moved to this neighborhood 3 years ago, well before my diagnosis. It was peaceful, with manicured lawns and friendly neighbors. Then my world turned upside down when the doctor said those dreaded words, "It's cancer." The treatments were brutal, leaving me unable to drive and dependent on home health care. Sarah had been my lifeline for the past 4 months, arriving each morning to change my surgical dressings, administer my medications, and monitor my vitals. After that first confrontation, I called Barbara directly. "There's absolutely no rule against medical professionals visiting residents," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady despite my growing anger. I reviewed all the HOA documentation before Sarah started coming. Barbara's response chilled me. "Well, the board just passed a new, quiet wellness policy," she said with a smugness that made my skin crawl. "Non-resident service providers create disruption and compromise our community's tranquility. We have to think about property values, you know." I later discovered no such policy existed, at least not officially. But that didn't stop Barbara. The next day, she was waiting when Sarah arrived, standing at my gate with a clipboard and a digital camera. "I need to see identification and proof of medical licensing," she demanded, snapping photos of my nurse and her car. "And I'll need copies for our records." Sarah complied, though I could see how uncomfortable she was. Later that week, Barbara began parking her SUV partially blocking my driveway, forcing Sarah to park further away and carry her equipment. When I confronted her about it, Barbara claimed it was coincidental, with a smile that suggested otherwise. The harassment escalated over the next 2 weeks. Barbara issued me violation notices, with fabricated fines for unauthorized commercial visitors. $50 the first week, $100 the second. I sent letters from my oncologist explaining the medical necessity of home care, along with highlighted sections of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Barbara responded by posting laminated notices around the neighborhood about maintaining our exclusive residential character. Sarah filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, but as I later discovered, Barbara never shared it with the other members. Instead, she sent a condescending email to Sarah's nursing agency about respecting community guidelines. When my sister came to stay with me and confronted Barbara directly, she just shrugged and said, "I'm protecting the neighborhood's tranquility and property values. Your brother should consider a care facility if he needs so much attention." The breaking point came exactly 1 month after the first incident. I woke up feeling particularly weak. The chemo was hitting me hard that week. When Sarah texted that she had arrived but couldn't get in, I dragged myself to the window. What I saw made my blood run cold. The front gate was chained shut with a heavy padlock, and a large red sign was nailed to my fence. "No medical visitors, by order of the HOA." Sarah called me, panicked. "I can't get in, and I have your pain medication and fresh dressings." Should I call the police? I told her no. In my experience, getting police involved in HOA disputes usually made things worse. I tried calling Barbara, but she wouldn't answer. My sister was out of town, and I was too weak to cut the chain myself. For the first time since my diagnosis, I missed my treatment. That night, the pain became unbearable. Without my medication and with infected surgical dressings I couldn't change myself, I developed a dangerous fever. Around midnight, I collapsed trying to reach the bathroom. Thankfully, I was wearing my medical alert pendant and managed to press the button before losing consciousness. The next thing I remember was waking up in the emergency room, with my sister crying beside me and a doctor explaining I had developed sepsis, a potentially fatal complication. My sister Lisa was beyond furious. "This isn't just harassment anymore," she said, clutching my hand in the hospital. "She nearly killed you." While I recovered, Lisa contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes and disability rights. What he discovered shocked even me, who had been on the receiving end of Barbara's tyranny. Attorney James Morello uncovered that Barbara had been fabricating HOA rules for months, not just for me but for several residents she had personal vendettas against. She had never held the required meetings for new regulations, forged board member signatures on official documents, and used HOA funds to pay for her personal crusades, including hiring a private security guard the day she chained my gate, specifically instructed to keep Sarah out. With this evidence, James filed charges against both Barbara personally and the HOA for harassment, obstruction of medical care, and reckless endangerment. When local news caught wind of the story, cancer patient denied home care by rogue HOA president, it spread like wildfire. Disability advocacy groups organized a protest outside our neighborhood gates, and suddenly, the other board members were falling over themselves to distance themselves from Barbara's actions. The most satisfying moment came exactly 6 weeks after Barbara first stopped Sarah at my gate. I was finally back home, recovering well with proper care, when I heard commotion outside again. This time, it was 2 police officers at Barbara's door with an arrest warrant. From my porch, I watched as she tried to hide behind her position. "This is absurd. I was enforcing community guidelines. I have HOA immunity," she protested as they calmly explained there was no such thing as HOA immunity from criminal charges. As they led her to the police car in handcuffs, she continued her rant. "Do you know what this man's nurse is doing to our property values? What about our neighborhood rights?" Several neighbors had come out to watch, many recording with their phones. One officer simply replied, "Ma'am, the right to medical care trumps your concerns about property values." The judge was not impressed with Barbara's defense. She was convicted of multiple charges including criminal interference with health care, harassment, and fraudulent misrepresentation. The sentence came down hard: 6 months in county jail, a $25,000 fine, 3 years probation, and mandatory community service at, ironically, a cancer treatment center. The look of absolute shock on her face as the gavel came down was something I'll never forget. "But I was just enforcing the rules," she whispered as her attorney shook his head in disgust.